The Valorian Dominion had ruled half the galaxy for 3,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever stopped them from taking what they wanted. Their ships were massive and beautiful in a terrible way, covered in sharp angles and glowing with purple energy that could burn through any metal known to exist. Their soldiers stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin, like polished stone, and they feared nothing because nothing had ever given them a reason to feel fear when the Dominion's expansion fleet reached the outer edges of human-controlled space. The admirals aboard those ships expected the same thing they always found when meeting a new species. They expected fear, then resistance, then defeat, then submission. The first human ship they encountered was a small trading vessel carrying medical supplies to a colony on the frontier. The Valorian warship was 100 times its size, and when the captain of that warship demanded the humans identify themselves and prepare for inspection, the human pilot simply said, "Yes, of course. We will comply with whatever you need." The Valorians searched the ship and found nothing of interest. Just humans going about their business with calm faces and quiet voices over the next several months. The Dominion sent scouts deeper into human territory, and everywhere they went, they found the same thing: small colonies with simple defenses, old ships that looked like they might fall apart at any moment, and humans who bowed their heads and asked politely what the Dominion required of them. High Archon Valeth Crom sat in his throne room on the Dominion's capital world and listened to reports from his generals with growing amusement. "They do not fight back at all?" he asked, his 4 eyes narrowing with curiosity. "Not once." "High Archon," replied General Thaxis, who commanded the expansion fleet. "They surrender before we even threaten them, and they seem almost eager to please us." The High Archon leaned back and let out a rumbling laugh that echoed through the chamber. "How disappointing," he said. "I had hoped for at least some entertainment, but it seems these humans are nothing more than servants waiting for masters." He waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "Claim their territory, establish governors on their major worlds, and put them to work in the mines and factories. They will serve the Dominion well as laborers." And so it happened that Valorian governors arrived on human colony after human colony, and the humans accepted them without protest. They paid the tributes the Dominion demanded. They worked in the facilities the Dominion built, and they never once raised a weapon against their new rulers. The official records of the Dominion marked Earth and all human territories as pacified Sector 447, and classified humanity as a docile species, with no military significance. But there were some in the Dominion's intelligence division who noticed strange things that did not fit the picture of a weak and broken species. Analyst Verix spent many cycles studying human space, and what she found made her uneasy in ways she could not explain. Around the planet the humans called Sol 3, or Earth, there were massive orbital structures that looked like graveyards for ships. These ships were unlike anything the humans currently operated, and they were enormous, some stretching for kilometers, with weapon systems that Verix could not identify no matter how hard she tried. She wrote report after report to her superiors, warning them that these ships might be more than museum pieces, that they might represent capabilities the humans were hiding. But no one listened to her. "You are being paranoid," her commander told her. "Those ships have not moved in centuries, and the humans themselves say they are relics from a dark age they have moved past. But what if they are lying?" Verix asked. Her commander laughed at her. "Look at them," he said. "They cannot even maintain proper warships now. And you think they are secretly capable of operating those ancient hulks? You give them too much credit." Verix was reassigned to a different sector, and her reports were filed away where no one would ever read them. The years passed, and humanity continued to serve the Dominion quietly. They worked hard. They paid their tributes on time, and they caused no trouble at all 50 years after first contact. Most Valorians had forgotten that humanity was even a conquered species. Because they had never acted like one, they had simply accepted their place in the galaxy and gotten on with their lives. There were humans who had not forgotten in secret facilities on Earth, and hidden stations scattered across human space. Men and women trained for a day they hoped would never come. Admiral Helena Vance was one of them. She had been 12 years old when the Valorians arrived. Old enough to remember the debates that had raged across human civilization about what to do. There were those who wanted to fight, who said humanity should never bow to alien conquerors, no matter the cost. But the majority had chosen differently. We know what we are, the leaders of Earth had said. We know what happens when we go to war, because we spent thousands of years doing it to ourselves before we finally learned to stop. If we fight the Valorians, we will become something terrible, and even if we win, we will have lost ourselves in the process. Better to wait, to endure, to hope that perhaps one day we can find a peaceful solution. Helena had understood the wisdom of that choice, even as a child, but she had also understood something else. Something the leaders did not say out loud, but everyone knew they were not giving up. They were buying time. The savage Starfleet, they called it. The collection of ancient warships that orbited Earth and silent ships from the age before humanity had chosen peace. Ships built for destruction on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Those ships would remain dormant unless humanity had no other choice. Unless something happened that made peace impossible. Helena had spent 85 years preparing for that day. Training crews in secret, maintaining the old ships, hoping she would die before ever having to use them. She was 97 years old now, and she had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the day would never come. Then the reports arrived from New Geneva, and Admiral Helena Vance knew that everything was about to change. New Geneva was one of the most beautiful colonies in human space. A world of green mountains and blue oceans where 12 million people had built a life of peace and simple happiness. The city of harmony, its capital, sat in a valley surrounded by forests that turned golden in the autumn. And every year during the month of December, the people gathered for the Festival of Remembrance. This was humanity's most sacred celebration, a time when they remembered all the wars they had fought against each other and honored their decision to choose peace instead of endless conflict. Families came together. Children played in the streets, and the whole city glowed with lights and music and laughter. Executor Thalrix watched it all from his command ship in orbit and felt nothing but disgust. He had been the governor of New Geneva for 3 years, and in all that time, he had grown to hate the humans more and more with each passing day, not because they caused trouble, but because they did not. They were too quiet, too obedient, too willing to accept whatever he demanded of them. And something about their calm faces and patient eyes made him feel like they were looking down on him. Somehow his superiors in the Dominion had been sending him messages recently, complaints about the productivity of the mines and factories in his sector. The humans are not working hard enough, they said. You must push them harder. Thalrix had tried. He had extended work hours and reduced rest periods and punished those who fell behind. But the numbers were still not good enough. Now he stood on the bridge of his ship, looking down at the Festival of Remembrance, and he made a decision that would change the course of history. They waste time on celebrations when they should be working, he said to his officers. They think their little traditions matter more than serving the Dominion. He turned to his weapons commander. Target the capital city. The officer hesitated, his 4 eyes going wide with surprise. Executor. There are millions of civilians down there. The Dominion's policy is to avoid unnecessary destruction of labor resources. I am the authority in this sector. Thalrix snapped. And I am telling you that these humans need to learn their place. A demonstration is required, one they will never forget. The weapons commander obeyed. because that was what Valorians did when their superiors gave orders the ship's main cannon charged with purple energy. And then a beam of light shot down from orbit and struck the city of Harmony. The explosion was visible from space. 17 million humans died in 90 seconds. Vaporized or crushed or burned as the entire valley was transformed into a crater of glass, and ash. The festival of remembrance ended in fire. And the screams of the dying echoed across emergency broadcast channels before falling silent forever. Tarek smiled and opened a communication channel to broadcast across all human-controlled space. "Let this serve as a lesson to all of you," he said, his voice cold and cruel. "You exist to serve the Valorian Dominion, nothing more. And any time you waste on your pathetic human customs is time stolen from your masters. Work harder, or watch more of your cities burn." He ended the transmission and felt satisfied with himself, confident that the humans would now be too afraid to ever cause problems again. He was very, very wrong across human space. The broadcast was received in silence in homes and workplaces and schools. Humans watched the images of New Geneva's destruction with faces that showed no expression at all. They did not scream or cry or panic. They simply watched. And then they began to move on Earth, in the ancient command center buried deep beneath the mountains of a region once called Switzerland. Admiral Helena Vance received the news from her communications officer. She stood perfectly still for a long moment, her old hands gripping the railing in front of her, her eyes closed as if she was praying. 17 million, she said quietly. "They killed 17 million of our people during the Festival of Remembrance." "Yes, Admiral," the officer replied, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. Helena opened her eyes, and there was something in them that had not been there for decades. Something cold and hard and absolutely terrifying. "Send the signal," she said. "Admiral, are you sure? Once we do this, there is no going back." "I am sure," Helena replied. "They have made peace impossible, and now they will learn what that means." The signal went out across human space, carried on frequencies the Valorians did not know how to detect. It reached every human world, every station, every ship, and everywhere it was received. People stopped what they were doing and began to prepare in the orbital graveyards around Earth. Lights flickered on aboard ships that had sat dark and silent for 400 years. Reactors that had been cold for centuries began to warm up, and weapon systems that humanity had sworn to never use again came online one by one. The savage Starfleet was waking across the galaxy. Valorian sensors detected strange energy readings from human space. Readings that made no sense to the analysts who tried to interpret them. "What is happening?" demanded High Archon Valith Crom when the reports reached him. "What are the humans doing?" No one could give him an answer on Earth. Admiral Vance walked through the corridors of the command center to the transport that would take her to orbit around her. Men and women moved with purpose, their faces grim and determined. Their training finally being put to use after generations of preparation. She thought about the choice humanity had made 50 years ago. The choice to endure and hope for peace. That hope was dead now, killed by Executor Thalrix and his casual cruelty. "We tried," Helena whispered to herself as she boarded the transport. "We really tried, but the time for trying was over now. It was time for war." The transport lifted off and carried her toward the orbiting dreadnought that would serve as her flagship. A ship called the Wrath of Terra that stretched 7 kilometers from bow to stern as she approached. She saw the other ships of the savage Starfleet coming to life around her. 147 vessels of destruction that represented everything humanity had tried to leave behind. They were beautiful in the worst possible way. And Helena knew that when they finished what they were about to do, the galaxy would never look at humanity this same way again. "Forgive us," she said as she stepped onto the bridge of the Wrath of Terra, but she was not asking forgiveness from the Valorians, was asking forgiveness from herself, and from all the humans who would have to live with what they were about to become. Supreme Commander Vexith stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Pride, and watched the tactical display with complete confidence. 800 warships under his command, the largest fleet in this sector of space, more than enough to crush any threat that might appear. The humans had been acting strangely in recent days, and there were strange reports of energy signatures coming from their home system. But Vexith was not concerned. He had read the official assessments of humanity, and he knew they were a docile species with no real military capability whatever they were doing. It was probably just some kind of protest against the discipline Executor Thaurix had delivered at New Geneva. Let them protest, Vexith said to himself. It will not change anything. Then his sensor officer made a sound that Vexith had never heard a Valorian make before. A sound of pure terror. Commander. Ships emerging from hyperspace, multiple contacts, 147 vessels. Vexith turned to look at the display and felt his 4 hearts skip a beat. The ships that appeared on his screen were unlike anything he had ever seen. Massive beyond reason, bristling with weapons that glowed with strange energies his sensors could not identify. What are those? He demanded. Those cannot be human ships. The humans have nothing like that. Sir, the energy signatures match human technology. These are definitely their vessels. That is impossible. But the ships were real, and they were moving toward his fleet with terrifying speed. Vexith forced himself to remain calm and issued orders in a voice that almost did not shake. All ships. Form defensive formation. Prepare to engage the enemy. He had 800 warships against 147, and despite the size of the human vessels, he was sure his numbers would give him the advantage. He was wrong. The Battle of Valorian Forward Command began when the Wrath of Terra fired its main weapon, a gravity lance that bent the fabric of space itself into a blade of pure force. The Dominion's Pride was 8 kilometers away when the lance struck. But distance meant nothing to a weapon like this. The flagship of the Valorian fleet simply crumpled like paper, being crushed in a fist, folding in on itself as gravity twisted metal and flesh into an unrecognizable mass. Supreme Commander Vexith died before he even understood what had hit him across the battlefield. The other human ships opened fire with weapons the Valorians had never encountered and could not defend against antimatter cascade projectors, released chains of explosions that jumped from ship to ship. Each blast triggering the next kinetic accelerators fired slugs of dense metal at speeds approaching the speed of light, punching through Valorian armor like it was made of paper. Plasma howitzers sprayed burning death across enemy formations, melting holes and cooking crews alive inside their own vessels. The Valorian captains tried to fight back. They fired their own weapons and launched their own attacks, but nothing they did seemed to matter. Their shots splashed harmlessly against human shields that glowed with golden light. Their ships died by the dozens while the human fleet suffered. Barely a scratch on the bridge of the Wrath of Terra. Admiral Helena Vance watched the destruction with a face made of stone. Target the command vessels first, she ordered. Remove their leadership and watch their coordination fall apart. Captain Chun relayed her commands, and the fleet adjusted its fire to focus on the largest Valorian ships one by one. The commanders of the enemy fleet died, and with each death, the Valorian response became more chaotic and desperate. Some ships tried to flee, breaking formation and running for hyperspace. Helena let them go. Let them run, she said. Let them carry the message back to the Dominion. Let them tell their masters what happened here today. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the savage Starfleet floated among the wreckage of 800 Valorian warships, and not a single human vessel had been destroyed. Admiral Vance ordered the fleet to rescue any Valorian survivors they could find. and thousands of enemy soldiers were pulled from the debris and taken aboard human ships as prisoners. They expected torture and execution, the same treatment the Dominion gave to defeated enemies. Instead, they were given medical care and food and clean places to sleep. Some of them could not understand this at all. "Why are you helping us?" one Valorian officer asked a human medic who was treating his wounds. "We are your enemies. You should want us to suffer." The medic looked at him with eyes that held no hatred, only a deep and terrible sadness. "We do not want anyone to suffer," she said. "We never wanted any of this, but your people gave us no choice." Word of the battle spread across the galaxy, faster than any ship could travel. The Valorian Dominion received thousands of reports from the survivors who had fled, and each report told the same impossible story. The humans had destroyed 800 warships in minutes. Their weapons were beyond anything the Dominion had ever encountered. Their ships were faster and stronger and more deadly than anything in Valorian records, and worst of all, they had only used a fraction of their fleet in the throne room of the Dominion's capital. High Archon Valeth Crom listened to the reports and felt something he had never felt before in his long life. Fear. How is this possible? He demanded of his advisors. "We were told the humans were a docile species with no military capability." "We were wrong, High Archon," admitted his chief intelligence officer. "It appears the humans have been hiding their true strength for centuries. But why? Why would they? Pretend to be weak?" The intelligence officer hesitated before answering. "Our analysts believe, High Archon, that the humans were not pretending to be weak. They were trying to be weak. They had sealed away their military capabilities because they did not want to use them." "That makes no sense." "With respect, High Archon, it makes perfect sense if you study their history." The officer activated a display showing the ancient records of Earth. Humans spent thousands of years at war with each other. They built weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They came within moments of total self-annihilation multiple times, and then they stopped. They chose peace, and they locked away their weapons hoping never to use them again. What Executor Thalrix did at New Geneva did not awaken a sleeping giant. It awoke a monster that had been trying very hard to stay asleep. The High Archon stared at the display, seeing images of human history, seeing the nuclear explosions and the wars and the endless rivers of blood, and for the first time in 3,000 years, he understood that the Dominion might actually lose a war. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the Wrath of Terra and looked out at the fleet assembling around her 147 ships, each one a nightmare of metal and fire, each one carrying weapons that humanity had sworn to never use again. The crew around her worked in silence, checking systems and running diagnostics on equipment that had not been activated in 4 centuries. These were not ordinary soldiers, and this was not an ordinary military. Every person in the savage Starfleet was a volunteer. Someone who had chosen to dedicate their life to preparing for a day that might never come. They had trained in secret, learned to operate technology their own people had tried to forget, and carried the terrible knowledge of what humanity was truly capable of. Captain Marcus Chen approached the Admiral with a data tablet in his hands. "All ships report ready." "Admiral," he said, "the fleet can jump to hyperspace on your command." Helena nodded slowly, her old face showing nothing of the storm of emotions inside her. "What is our first target?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Valorian Forward Command," Marcus replied. "They have 800 warships stationed at the edge of what they call Pacified Sector 447. That is our space. And those are the ships they use to keep us under control. 800 against 147. Helena said. "The Valorians will think they have the advantage." A thin smile crossed her lips, the first smile she had allowed herself in a very long time. "They are about to learn how wrong they are." She turned to face the bridge crew. Men and women who had dedicated decades of their lives to this moment. Before we go, I want you all to understand something, she said, her voice carrying across the silent bridge. What we are about to do will change everything, and there is no going back once we begin. We spent 50 years hoping this day would never come, hoping that somehow peace could be maintained, that the Valorians would eventually see us as equals and leave us alone. That hope died at New Geneva. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Valorians killed 17 million of our children during our most sacred festival, and they did it because they thought we were weak. They thought we were too broken to fight back. They were wrong. Humanity is not weak. We have never been weak. The truth is exactly the opposite. We chose peace because we remember what happens when we choose war. We remember the bombs and the blood and the mountains of corpses that our ancestors created when they fought each other for thousands of years. We sealed away our weapons and our warships because we were trying to become something better, something that did not solve problems through violence and destruction. But the Valorians have made that impossible now. Helena's eyes swept across the faces of her crew, and she saw the same cold determination reflected in every one of them. So today, we remember who we really are. We are the species that conquered a world with stone axes and bare hands. We are the species that split the atom and touched the face of God. We are the species that fought 1,000 wars against ourselves and somehow survived them all. We are humans, and the galaxy is about to find out what that means. The bridge erupted in a roar of voices. Not cheering exactly, but something deeper. Something that sounded almost like a war cry from an age before civilization. Helena raised her hand, and silence fell instantly. "Hell," she said. "Set course for Valorian forward command. Course set, Admiral. Communications. Open a channel to all ships. Channel open." Helena took a deep breath and spoke words that would echo through history. "All ships. This is Admiral Vance. Prepare to jump to hyperspace. Remember your training. Remember New Geneva. And remember who we are. Today, the wolves emerge. Jump." 147 ships vanished into the swirling tunnels of hyperspace, moving faster than light toward a battle that would shake the foundations of the galaxy on the wrath of Terra. Helena remained standing, watching the strange colors of hyperspace flow past the viewports. Captain Chen stood beside her, his young face tense with anticipation. "Admiral, may I ask you something?" "Of course. The weapons we are carrying. The things our ancestors built during the wars before the Great Peace. I have studied them. I know what they can do." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "Are we sure we want to use them? Once the galaxy sees what we are capable of, they will never see us the same way again." Helena was silent for a long moment. "Do you know why I joined the Savage Starfleet, Marcus?" "No, Admiral. I was 12 years old when the Valorians came, and I watched my parents argue about what to do. My father wanted to fight, and my mother wanted to surrender. In the end, we chose surrender. And I spent the next 85 years watching our people work as slaves for aliens, who thought we were nothing more than animals. I accepted that, because I believed it was better than the alternative. I believed that peace was worth any price." She turned to face the young captain. "But there are some things that cannot be accepted. There are some crimes that cannot be forgiven. And when the Valorians killed 17 million people during the Festival of Remembrance, they crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. So yes, we are sure. We are sure because we have no other choice. They wanted to see what happens when you push humanity too far. And now they will find out." The ship shuddered slightly as it prepared to exit hyperspace. "All hands to battle stations," Helena commanded. "We arrive in 30 seconds. The lights on the bridge shifted to a deep red as the crew prepared for combat. Helena Vance was 97 years old. But in this moment, She felt as strong and sharp as she had ever been in her life, the Valorians had thought. The war was already won. They had no idea that it was only just beginning. Exit hyperspace, ordered the Admiral, and the savage Starfleet burst into normal space like a pack of wolves descending on unsuspecting prey. The war lasted 3 years, and it was unlike any war the galaxy had ever seen. The humans did not fight like the Valorians expected them to fight. They did not conquer planets or enslave populations or destroy civilizations for the sake of revenge instead. They liberated every world Valorian dominion had conquered, every species they had enslaved, every planet they had stripped of resources and freedom. The humans freed them all. The savage Starfleet moved through Dominion space like a storm of justice, crushing military installations and destroying warships while leaving civilians untouched. Admiral Helena Vance gave the same orders at every engagement. Disable the enemy, rescue the oppressed, and move on to the next target. Some of her captains questioned this approach in the early days of the war. We should punish them, Captain Chun said after one battle. They killed 17 million of our people at New Geneva, and we are treating their civilians like they are innocent. Helena looked at the young captain with eyes that had seen too much. Their civilians are innocent, she said. The ones who killed our people were their leaders and their soldiers, not the farmers and workers and children who happened to be born under Dominion rule. We are not fighting this war to become monsters, Marcus. We are fighting it to stop monsters from hurting anyone else. The moment we start taking revenge on innocents, we become exactly what we are fighting against. Chun had no answer to that, and he never questioned the Admiral's approach again as the war continued. Something remarkable began to happen. Species that had been crushed under Valorian rule for centuries started to rise up and fight alongside the humans. The Kethrani, a race of insectoid beings who had been slaves for 500 years, formed their own fleet from stolen Valorian ships and joined the human advance, the Morvathi, giant crystalline creatures who had been forced to mine their own homeworld for Dominion resources, provided intelligence about enemy positions, and helped coordinate attacks. Dozens of other species, each with their own history of suffering under the Dominion, reached out to the humans and asked how they could help. Helena welcomed them all, and the war became something greater than just humanity fighting for revenge. It became a liberation, a breaking of chains, a galaxy finally rising up against the empire that had oppressed it for 3,000 years. The Valorian Dominion fought back with everything they had, but it was not enough. Their fleets were destroyed one by one. Their armies were defeated, their governors were captured or killed, and their territory shrank with every passing month. High Archon Valeth Crom watched his empire crumble and could not understand how this had happened. He had ruled half the galaxy. He had commanded the mightiest military in known space, and now he was losing everything to a species he once dismissed as worthless servants in the final days of the war. He made one last desperate attempt to save the Dominion. He gathered every remaining warship, every soldier, every weapon he could find, and assembled them at the Dominion's capital world for a final stand. Savage Starfleet arrived with allies from a dozen species, and the battle that followed was the largest in galactic history. It lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Dominion's last fleet was gone, and the capital world was surrounded by human ships. Admiral Helena Vance descended to the surface personally to accept the High Archon surrender. She was 100 years old now, kept alive by advanced medicine and sheer force of will, and she walked with a cane that she leaned on heavily. As she entered the throne room, Valeth Crom sat on his ancient throne, stripped of his weapons and his guards, looking at her with something between hatred and respect. You have won, he said. The Dominion is finished. Humanity has destroyed everything we built over 3,000 years. Helena stopped in front of him and looked up at the massive alien who had once ruled half the galaxy. We did not want to destroy anything, she said. We wanted to be left alone, to live in peace, to build a future where no one had to die in pointless wars. Your people made that impossible when they killed 17 million of our children. The High Archon made a sound that might have been a laugh. You are stronger than we ever imagined. Your weapons are superior. Your tactics are brilliant. You have proven yourselves to be the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and yet you speak of peace like it matters. I do not understand your species at all. Helena leaned on her cane and met his 4 eyes with her too. That is because you see strength as the ability to destroy, she said. We see strength as the ability to choose not to destroy. Even when we could, we built those weapons because we had to. We used them because we had no other choice, but we have never wanted to be warriors. We have always wanted to be something better. That is what your people never understood about us. We are not peaceful because we are weak. We are peaceful because we know exactly how dangerous we are when we are not. 6 months later, the Galactic Council met for the first time in history. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered on a neutral world to build a new order for the galaxy, one based on cooperation instead of conquest. Admiral Helena Vance addressed the council in what would be her final public appearance before retiring. We did not want this war, she said, her voice still strong despite her age. We never wanted to show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. But some lessons can only be taught in blood. She looked out at the assembled beings, creatures of every shape and size, many of whom had only recently been freed from Dominion rule. So let this be a warning to any future empire that thinks it can conquer and enslave and murder without consequences. There are some species you should never push too far. We are peaceful by choice, not by nature. And if you force us to make a different choice, you will not like what happens next. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Pray you never have to learn that lesson the way the Valorians did. The savage Starfleet returned to its orbital graveyards around Earth, and the great ships powered down once more. The weapons were sealed away. The crews went home to their families, and humanity returned to the quiet existence it had always preferred. But now, the galaxy watched them differently. Now, every species knew the truth about the humans. They were not the sheep among wolves. They were the wolf that had chosen to live among sheep, and heaven help anyone foolish enough to make them bare their teeth again.